Nigel Farage, who joins me from Washington, leader of the Brexit Party. But, of course, we'll have a word on that in a moment because that will be changing its name. But first up, Nigel, come on then, call it for us. What do you think is going to happen? Morning to you.
Good morning. Well, of course, it's tight. It's on a knife edge. I'll tell you what, Nick, whatever happens, the polling industry, I mean, why would we ever listen or pay any regard to what these people ever say again? Wrong about Brexit, wrong about Trump in 2016, and, of course, for all the world, it was a slam dunk for Joe Biden all the way through. It's on a knife edge. I think Trump will just about take it. I do, but goodness me, it could go either way.
And if the president is successful, what did he manage to latch onto in the US?
I think the very interesting thing about this is that Trump was saying we cannot live in lockdown. We have to get on with the rest of our lives, horrible though this virus is. And Biden was promising, UK-style lockdown and a long, dark, bleak winter. And I do think that message of optimism made a difference in the last couple of weeks.
You've campaigned with the president. You've known him well. When you were with him, I think it was last week, excuse me if I'm wrong, how would you describe his mood then, Nigel?
Ebullient. I mean, he always is anyway, but ebullient. I mean, his campaign got off to an awful start. The Tulsa rally, which was the first one, which I went to back in late June, it just wasn't right. The organisation wasn't right. The messaging wasn't right. The first debate, and I say this as a friend and supporter, was a disaster. He came across far too aggressively. He looked like an outsider, not like a president. But from the moment of the second debate, where he showed himself to be completely in command of the facts, he then has launched this extraordinary barnstorming tour of America. Nick, he turns up on Air Force One. He lands on the tarmac. He appears on the catwalk with rock music playing in the background. He delivers these incredible speeches for 90 minutes, perhaps even 2 hours at times. He did 6 of those yesterday. I mean, the guy is almost superhuman. And I tell you what, and by the way, I do think he's going to win. But even if he was to lose, he now has the most fanatical support base has ever been seen in modern Western politics.
How much does he feed off the energy of those crowds?
Oh, he loves it. I mean, look, he's the ultimate showman. I mean, he's one of the very few people I've ever met that makes me feel like an introvert. I mean, he is the most extraordinary guy. I mean, it's just off the charts. It's something else. And as I say, even if he loses, he will not, get out the pipe and put on the slippers and play the odd round of golf. He is not going away. Of that, I'm absolutely certain. But as I say, I repeat, I still think he's just going to get it.
And last couple of things. You rightly point to the polling industry. What about the media as well, Nigel? They would seem, particularly in the US, to have rather missed the boat here.
Well, I think they've been discredited now for years, but I think there's a bigger issue than just, CNN and CNBC and all these liberal New York jokers. I mean, they were never, ever, fake news, as the big man says. But what is more significant is the role of social media, the role of the tech giants, willfully, absolutely willfully, doing their best to censor stories about Joe Biden's son Hunter and the millions of dollars that he earned from the Ukraine, from China, and from Russia. Now, it may well all have been legitimate and above board. It may well be that this former crack addict suddenly became a genius businessman, but it should have been open to proper debate, and it wasn't, and they censored it.
You're not in line for millions, but I have note here that you could be in line for quite a healthy payout with a bet. Would you tell the listeners about the bet you've placed?
Well, I did have a bet. I like having bets, I mean, I backed Brexit at 3-1 against and 4-1 against. I backed Trump at 5-2 against in 2016, and I made just over £10,000 on those bets. So, being the sort of reckless individual that I am, I went double a quits on Trump at nearly 2-1 against. So, if he comes through with this, it's going to be a big win.
And finally, you're changing the name of the party to Reform UK. In a couple of sentences, why, Nigel Farage?
The Brexit Party, I think, is the most successful political party that's ever been seen in the Western world. We launched it when the country was in the depths of despair. We won a European election. We got rid of a useless Prime Minister. We paved the way for Boris Johnson to come in, and we've got Brexit. Now, we haven't got the final, end game of Brexit, but we got Brexit. And it seems to me now that the slogan that we launched with, which was change politics for good, is more relevant now than ever. The pandemic has shown we are governed by a bunch of incompetents, people of the calibre of Matt Hancock, who I certainly wouldn't employ in any capacity at all. £12 billion spent on test, track and trace. Companies like Serco being doled out with government contracts, a House of Lords that is now treated with contempt by most of the country. Brexit gives us independence. With that independence, we've now got to govern the country better. And the first task for Reform UK is to challenge lockdown, which will lead to more deaths and more misery, and is a huge mistake in my view.
Thank you for joining me from Washington. Nigel Farage, leader currently of the Brexit Party, returning to Reform UK and telling us about his bet.